mixed kind of an audience today. So just so that you are aware whom you are speaking to, the audience today is the IIT Alumni Center members. This is a body across all IITs in India. We have startups from all leading incubators in India. So it's not only Chennai centric or Tamil Nadu centric, but from all leading startups who have graduated from incubators. We have students from IIT Madras exploring becoming entrepreneurs, members of C5 and Nirman groups. There are IIT faculty, there are angel investors, VCs, serial entrepreneurs, and alumni of all IITs and leading IIMs in uh, Chennai. So it's a privilege to hear your thoughts relating to startups and the startup community. Gentlemen, we are in for a treat today. Lakshmi is a thought leader and a phenomenal inspirational speaker. I mean, I've had the privilege of hearing him many times. His brief resume has already been circulated to you along with the registration document. So I really don't want to repeat it. But all that I would like to add is that, believe me, the resume is very, very brief. It doesn't touch even a small percentage of what he has done, what he has achieved, and what he will do considering the causes he is associated with. I have known Lakshmi for a reasonably long time and known him well for the past 8 to 10 years. I've been privileged to know him well. One of the things I admire about him is humility in spite of his phenomenal accomplishments in his career and life till now. So once again, Lakshmi, thanks for agreeing to talk to us today. Ladies and gentlemen, over to Lakshmi. You're on mute, Lakshmi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gopal. And it's nice to be with friends from the industry, friends from the academic institutions, and colleagues from my past life. We are going through very interesting times. Gopal gave a embarrassingly overstretched narration of my accomplishments, but I'll take it. Thank you very much, Gopal. So the startup and the entrepreneurship is something that has been talked about for quite some time now. It is gaining speed and momentum as we speak, and it is going to touch very many areas. We'll just try and explore what are the areas that it has touched, what are some of the examples of good entrepreneurship, etc. I have no specific order in which I want to talk, nor do I want to prescribe anything saying that this is the way to do startups, etc. Those are things that I think will emerge as we go through some discussion after I spend about 25 to 30 minutes just talking about what is going on, what I see through my binoculars in the short, medium, and the long term. First and foremost, I just talked about entrepreneurship and the free enterprise system. This is something that the world has come to accept. The best way, whether you call it capitalism, some other form of socialism, etc. So I don't want to go into those isms, but generally saying that free enterprise system is something that has come to be adopted by most of the countries. It's come to be a clear winner, and it is the system that has taken most people out of poverty in many nations, including countries like China, India, etc. So it's a simple thing. What are the simple free enterprise system? It's all about entrepreneurship. It's about rule of law. It's about free trade. It's about globalization. It's about property rights. It's about many other things that we are all familiar with. It's that particularly those of us who have been in the technology industry understand this better than anyone else, because we have enjoyed this free enterprise, free trade, globalization right from the beginning. When I talk about the IT industry, it started with the big wig like a Tata Consultancy Services, and that led to a whole revolution in the technology industry, where we are playing very important and in some areas a very pioneering role. Just to give an example, it's a $200 billion industry today. And the aspiration of that industry is to get to about $500 billion in the time that it takes India to get a $5 trillion economy, contribute something like 10%. So there's a whole lot of people working on it, including NASSCOM, the industry association, people who are part of this industry. And why is it that this industry is so gung-ho about it? The industry is gung-ho about it primarily because there are two things that are driving. Earlier, to solve problems of the world, to solve the problems of hunger, poverty, etc., people said education, educate the people, education, literacy, that's the solution. Now they're saying in addition to education, it is digitization that is going to help. Digitization in education as well as digitization broadly, which is what is driving the growth in the technology sector, which has become all pervasive, not just as technology independently, but as it applies to many of the industry verticals. Some of those examples we'll see as we go forward. So 200 to $500 billion, yes, possible. Why? Digitization. And where is it applied? Everywhere. You know, if you want to tackle the problem of climate change, digitization as a solution. In fact, there is a nice small phrase that GE put out, General Electric, saying that digitize to decarbonize. You know, it's a rallying cry. It's something that they did quite some time back when they started with the Predix platform, and that's something that they've adopted in terms of applying digital techniques in the engines that they manufacture, the way they collect data, the way it is monitored, the energy systems that they produce, in the medical devices that they produce, how digital plays a role. They've really taken that to heart and used digitization, which has led to a growth in that company and growth to a whole lot of industries there. So in addition to entrepreneurship, opportunities for growth in these areas of both education and digitization have provided plenty of inspirational leaders, leading companies, innovation that is spiraling the startup growth in the country. While technology, entrepreneurship, technology startup, many of us are very familiar with, we are not so familiar, or most of the people are not very familiar with how the innovation in other industries also using digitization as well as other methods is changing the landscape. I'll take the other example of the high growth industry, which is the pharmaceutical industry today. The pharmaceutical industry, again, an industry or a sector where India can play a major role. It has played a major role. It is seen as a sector that India can contribute tremendously, not just for itself, but to make a global impact. That's clearly, I mean, the stories that we hear are primarily related to vaccines, but it is in a whole lot of areas, the area of genomics. Just take the example of a state like Telangana. Telangana is focused on pharmaceutical industry. They have 800 or more companies in the biotech, broadly the pharmaceutical industry, which will include vaccines, genomics, so much so that they have planned to increase export of pharmaceutical produce, export contribution, take it to about 30% of the overall contribution that India makes as far as export is concerned. I mean, in other words, 30% of the exports of pharmaceutical goods will come from Telangana, and they have created a genome valley, 19,000 acres of area where they're attracting a lot of these companies to come and set up shop. And many of the companies that are there, that started there, including the likes of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, etc., are well known and making their type of contribution. And if there are companies that are growing rapidly in the pharmaceutical area, bringing out vaccines so rapidly, it's again thanks to innovative startups and information technology or digital technologies. The technology of messenger RNA that some of you may be familiar with, based on which Pfizer and Moderna developed their vaccines. Moderna has been doing it for the last 7 or 8 years, continuous research in that particular area without getting out any product. And this pandemic was a great opportunity for them to prove that technology. And the data that they produced in a short period of time, usually for those of us who are familiar with the clinical trials and the number of phases it has to go through, and the amount of data that has to be furnished, etc., etc. Typically, it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 years for any of these drugs to hit the market. In a quick double rapid time, triple rapid time, vaccines were approved, although for emergency use. But that is a big step because both the regulators loosened up a little bit, but the data that was produced using digital technologies were so compelling and convincing that people had to accept the results and authorize the use of these vaccines. So I mean, it's a great innovation that continues to happen. And are there other companies that are doing it? Are we only producing vaccines based on someone else's innovation, like the Covishield from AstraZeneca and the Oxford Technologies? Not really. There are companies like Bharat Biotech, which is using the traditional method for vaccine development. And I know of at least one company in the Indian Institute of Science that's trying to produce vaccines, not necessarily only for COVID, but general influenza vaccines using a different technology, completely safe. And the goal there is to see if these vaccines can be produced and supplied at room temperature. You know, one of the largest problems that we have is in terms of supplying this in cold storage and maintaining it at degrees below 10, below 5 degrees, which is a challenge in a country like India. So room temperature vaccines will be such a great relief for people here in India. Again, research is going on. There are startups working in that particular area. So there are enough examples of how people are turning to entrepreneurship, turning to startup. And of course, IIT Madras itself is a great example, including the research park and the Nirman program, etc. And the last time I was there, I think it was about 6 or 8 months back, there were a number of companies that presented. I was looking back at the notes that were there just to see how many are surviving. Qmicon was one. That was a social media startup. I think the founder of that company has joined NVIDIA. I don't know what has happened to that company. Hyperverge, Galaxy-I, SignTalk, Handyman Prosthetics. So many of these startups that started. But the unfortunate thing is the visibility after 1 or 2 events drops down. Discovery of these startups by a wider audience is so important. It's so important for these people. You know, when people talk about being bombarded by spam mails, many of these may appear as spam to many people who receive it. But people like us, and I'm sure the participants who are joined this call and people like me, it's definitely not spam to us. We look to these type of mails coming to us indicating what's going on in that particular field, because this gives us an opportunity to, one, talk about it, and two, to see if there are opportunities where we can connect them to help them succeed. So that is something that we will have to take up. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it as we go along. So startup environment is thriving. I talked about the larger initiatives like the pharmaceuticals, etc. At the next level, if you see, entrepreneurship in educational institutions, a tremendous amount that is taking place, not just supporting entrepreneurs, but academic institutions behaving like corporates and venturing out into other areas, other adjacent areas, not unrelated areas, but adjacent areas. Great example, again, IIT Madras, the Center for Continuing Education, CCE, this started a number of courses leveraging the NPTEL assets that they have created, as well as creating new assets. And they've got a digital skills academy that has been set up, which has done a number of courses. The last time we had a review meeting of that with Professor Mangala Sundar, who's leading this digital skills academy. Over 2,000 people had been trained in data sciences, in cyber security, with the help of partners like FIST, a forensic security company, plus well-developed partners that have been working with IIT Madras for a number of years, like GUVI, Gyan Data, etc. So that number is rapidly increasing in collaboration with NASSCOM. IIT Madras has chosen an entrepreneurial route to educating or reskilling people in the industry in some of the newer areas, and they are in the best position to do that. So that's kind of a venture. It's another venture that I'm associated with in Chennai Mathematical Institute, trying to create a Fields Institute type of an institute for computer science. Some of you may be familiar with the Fields Institute based in Canada, which awards the Fields Medal for excellence in mathematical sciences, almost considered the equivalent of Nobel Prize in mathematics. That's an institute that's doing some phenomenal work in fundamental research. They collaborate with the Institute of Theoretical Studies, Theoretical Science in Bangalore. So we want to create something similar in the area of computer science. We called it the FC Kohli Center in honor of the person who founded this industry. That's an initiative. That is an entrepreneurial initiative, if you like, from an academic institution. Look at the Indian Institute of Science. They want to start a medical school. There is a medical school and hospital that the institute is trying to start and offering higher research-based degrees. They're in a good position. They have one of the best microbiology departments, one of the best bioscience departments, one of the best chemistry departments, etc. So they want to leverage that capability that they have along with the medical skills that the people bring in and offer an MD PhD program for students to do research and obtain their degree so that they can practice in the hospital that they're building. So that's a huge entrepreneurial activity. So likewise, there are several academic institutions which are also behaving like corporates and by going into adjacent areas and starting new initiatives, which bodes well for both the startup community, the ecosystem in terms of making available capability, talent, capacity of the higher order, not just the ordinary thing, but the higher end research talent, which will immensely help the startup industry. Now, switching gears, coming to some of the smaller startups that we are familiar with, give you some 3 or 4 examples of how they started and what are some of the things that they did that they shouldn't have done, and what are some of the things that they did right based on which they succeeded. Give you one example in the non-tech area. I'll try and see how many examples I can pick up from the non-tech area. I've just made a note of a few here. A company called this Sprout Life, which makes yoga bars. Yoga bars, I think all of you must be familiar with. It's a growing brand. It's grown substantially. It's a simple thing. It's just putting together some ingredients to develop some healthy, nutrient, protein-rich bars that can be consumed by people either after an exercise or as a normal snack. When they started, when I got an opportunity to visit that place, this is a small outfit in a small 10 by 20 room in Bangalore. The only machinery that they had was the wrapping machinery. The bars will be handmade. A couple of people will get the right type of ingredients, the badam, the pista, all the ingredients that go into it. Use a mixie, mix it up well, use all the ingredients, and there is a pulp that comes in. The pulp will just go through the machine. It will come out as bars. It will be wrapped and it will come out. 100 to 200 bars per day was the capacity that they had. They could have produced more at that point that I visited. This is about 5 or 6 years back. But that was the demand that they had. It was an experimental startup. And then from there, this was started by 2 ladies, 2 sisters, Suhasini and Anindita. Kept at it for quite some time. People who visited that type of a factory or a place would say, forget it. This is not going to scale up. There is no way this can do anything beyond just growing into a small niche segment. But some of us said that, at least it may or may not succeed, but at least the spirit was very, very encouraging, spirit of the 2 founders. So we said, let's put some money and encourage them to do it. And today they have raised subsequent rounds and they've been very frugal in their operations. Yoga Bars is a well-recognized brand. They've got good volumes. They've shifted to their own facility in Peenya Industrial Estate in Bangalore, and they're producing some fantastic products. They've expanded the portfolio of products that they have, and it's a fairly well-recognized household name as far as snacking bars are concerned. So the lesson that I learned is it's been a good investment. I invested there. The lesson that I learned was just encouraging the 2 spirited entrepreneurs, who were not ashamed of showing what they were doing at the scale at which they were doing, saying that this is how it is. They were manually mixing it. A couple of people, I mean, it's just 2 assistants to help them. They used to wear the gloves and get that clean equipment and produce it in a very clean environment. Did it manually and then grew from there. It's that spirit at the end of the day. If I look back, I'll say, hey, that spirit we have recognized and celebrated, whether they succeed or not, they have at least created a brand. And that's a very, very satisfying experience. Likewise, from IIT Madras Research Park, a company that all of you would be familiar with, it's a Grintech, a battery manufacturing company, or look at some examples of, electric scooters. The electric scooters, you talk about different models. Different business models, not necessarily the scooter models. Ather was one of the earliest ones to start. Ampere, another e-scooter company now, but they weren't the e-scooter company when they started. They were just the e-scooter in a different form that they produced, which is battery operated, that could be used inside a plant, inside a large factory, where instead of the workers moving from one end to the other off the assembly line, they could use these vehicles and an e-vehicle to transport goods within the factory setup. And then they pivoted, looking at the opportunity after Crompton's took over. And then they have fairly large ambitions as far as the e-scooter market is concerned. They are planning to set up a 1 million scooter a year plant in Ranipet. They've already started making some work there, and they're talking to the various battery suppliers. So these are 3 different scooter companies. The third one is Ola. So the model that they followed, they're solving the same problem. Ather started from scratch, pure entrepreneurial effort. Everything was indigenous, driven by passion, by just 2 founders, and a very, very successful company. Took time to scale up, but hopefully they'll scale. Their aspiration wasn't to scale in a short period of time. Ampere had to struggle, but pivoted. Now they are a little more aggressive in scaling. The plans that they're making calls for higher investment, and I'm sure they'll succeed. A different type of a model, supported by a large group, not by angel investors or venture capital funds. And Ola said, this is something, it's a space, there is a huge market, I just want to grab it. If I had to spend double the money to come out into the market with greater speed, if it takes 2 years or 3 years for somebody to set up this factory, I want to do it in 1 year and be early to the market, even if it means double the investment, because I'm a successful investor, successful entrepreneur. There are people to back me. Money is not a problem. So he has demonstrated that it's something that can be done in real fast time. Same 3 models, same problem being addressed, different approaches by the entrepreneurs, different levels of investment, different investors at different points in time. So the choices are made by the investors. They say, which is the path that I want to take, high risk path, high speed path, or moderate risk, etc., etc. So these type of examples are available in every area, in electric vehicle batteries. That's something that is possible. In energy systems, energy storage systems. Again, energy storage systems, people start with lithium ion and then going into other chemistries, whereas there is a newer technology coming out of the Cambridge University, a company called Ambri. I'm sure many of you would have read about it. Just a chemistry professor who's known for his lectures, started this company, started making these batteries which operate at 500, 600 degrees. Unlike the problems of the smaller batteries that we use in vehicles, which have to operate at a lower temperature. But these are large mega grid scale storage of power, and which is very, very popular. And that's something that some of the models, I'm sure there's a lot of video that's available about this company that I would encourage all of you to see it, because it talks about how they went about it over a period of time and created this new technology. Very, very fascinating. So there are plenty of such examples that we have. There are also smaller examples of companies trying to attempt smaller problems, and some succeeding, some not so successful. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. There is one company here in Chennai, started in the NASSCOM startup in Tidal Park, a company called Flower Pot Technologies, or Greenpool is the brand name. Essentially, what they were trying to do is to tackle the problem of congestion on OMR which is the, for those of you who are not familiar with OMR, that's the IT corridor in Chennai, where the commute from one end to the other end could take as long as an hour and 15 minutes. One end is where the people's residences are located, and the other end is where the IT industry is gravitating towards. So it takes a long time. And in order to reduce that congestion and to be more efficient, he wanted to have ride-sharing application that he developed and encourage people to pick up. I mean, using the apps, share a ride with people who are going in that direction. Very successful. Many of the companies signed up. Wipro, I think, was the first company to sign up with them, encouraging the employees to use that application. And initially it was free, you didn't have to pay. Later on, they said, there is a token amount that you can pay to the driver who's giving you a ride. They had to fight all the regulations because the regulators saw it as a taxi, and so they had to get some license, etc. But they convinced that it is not a taxi service. And I mean, finally they relented. It was working out well. They were growing. It is a model that was replicated in Bangalore too. And suddenly the pandemic hit, because of which the opportunity for ride sharing and a whole lot of commuting almost came to a standstill. So they had to pivot, they had to change, but they couldn't go. The app wouldn't work. Simultaneously, around the same time, there is another company in Bangalore called Urban Lithium. Urban Lithium was trying to do a similar thing, except that they were using people, they were trying to transport people, again in the IT sector, using electric vehicles only, pure electric vehicles. Again, corporates like Accenture and all signed up with them. And they would get on lease 200, 250 of these electric vehicles and start transporting them from various locations. And they found this app that was developed by Flowerpot Technologies and this Greenpool Technologies appropriate, and the two started collaborating. And the collaboration started even before the pandemic, and during pandemic, they were also badly hit. As a result, both the companies, one of them, I mean, Greenpool, of course, wound up, and the other company, Urban Lithium, is in the process of winding down. It's a failure not because the entrepreneurs didn't try. It's a failure because of the environment factors that they never thought would happen. So is there an opportunity for them to make a comeback? Yes, possibly. Once the people start commuting, there may be an opportunity for it in the same form or a different form. So they're keeping that idea open. In the meantime, the person who started this Greenpool has started working with Redbus as an employee with the technology and the platform that he had, and is developing something for buses that would make them more efficient, etc. So here, what is it that you learn when somebody like a Redbus or a new entrepreneur looks at the entrepreneur who started this Greenpool? That company is not considered as a failure because this person started well, was growing. It was an environmental factor that impacted that he couldn't have anticipated. So as a result, the confidence of that entrepreneur hasn't waned. He is still gung-ho. He wants to start another enterprise, and people are willing to back him. Those of the people who backed him the first time are willing to back him again because they understand what he went through and why his previous venture failed. And the most important thing is transparency. He was transparent throughout the process. What are the challenges? How did he grow? What are the failures? What are the problems he had to solve? What are the challenges that he had in terms of communicating with the regulators, etc., etc. So that's one type of company where we have good lessons that the entrepreneur learned, and the mentors who are working with them also learn to see that how to avoid those type of problems. The second thing is there's another company. Let me see if that's the one that I want to pick up, or there's something else. This is just the last example that I'll take. Yeah, I mean, this is in the area of space. A company called Digantra, a startup from the Institute of Science, which is trying to see how the space debris that could pose potential problem for future space artifacts, space satellites, etc. There are ways of avoiding this collision. The current technologies provide for it. There hasn't been any collision, but they came up with the newer technology, which uses a constellation of satellites, small satellites that goes into orbit, that keeps track of all the debris, and provides even greater advanced warning for staying clear of collisions. The problem is simple. The solution is simple. It's just collision detection in advance and alerting people so that they can take appropriate measure to safeguard their assets in space. A lot of people were interested in it. This is a case where the investors were chasing the idea. Investors were chasing them. As part of Chennai Angels, we chased these entrepreneurs from here in Chennai. We came to a conclusion with them. We mustered all the funding that is required, that he wanted for the first stage of scaling up. But suddenly a bigger venture capital company, Kalari Capital, came in. They had a specialist who understood space a lot more, gave a higher valuation. And they said, we would like to invest. So would you come with us? And this entrepreneur came to us and said, hey, this is an opportunity that has come. What do I do? You helped us. We want to stay with you, but we want your suggestions. We said, no, an institution is far better for you at this stage, even at this stage. So go with them and we'll keep progressing. And there was a mentor who was mentoring Digantra at that stage. We said this help will continue to be available to you whenever you want to use that. So this is an example that I want to show where there is the investors are chasing good startups, good ideas, good entrepreneurs. It's even more true now because there's a lot more money that's available among the investor community, particularly towards entrepreneurship, towards startups. And it's important for people to realize and recognize that that is the case, not to worry about investment. If they have a good spirited organization, good story, money is available. And the third thing that I do want to mention is it's not always about money. Many of the entrepreneurs that I've come across keep talking about initial seed round. How do I plan the Series A, Series B, Series C, etc. In many cases, it may not be necessary for these companies to go that far. They can bootstrap themselves, or after 1 or 2 rounds of investment, there are other avenues for getting capital, other avenues for growing, etc. But they seem to be driven by what other companies are doing, driven by the language that the investment community uses. So they just want to keep going, just going one after the other, and just want to keep investing and saying that, no, why is it that you want to take so much money? Because I want to grow faster. Profit is not something that I'm looking at, etc. Whereas it becomes necessary in certain sectors where you have to look at the bottom line also as you grow and not necessarily take too much money, which, servicing the expectations of those investors may become challenging in the future. The great example, of course, is Zoho. Zoho is a very successful company, startup that came out of Chennai or Tamil Nadu, doing very well, growing very rapidly, good top line, making a lot of money. And there were investors chasing the founder, Sridhar Vembu, constantly, but he wouldn't entertain any of them. He said, I just don't want the money. I'm producing enough. I'm generating enough profits. I'm just flowing back. My needs are very limited. It's not as though I want to splurge. I have other ESG goals, social goals, which is the new thing, environment, social and governance goals. So I'm going to focus on that. Just stay away from me. And that's the other model that people are adopting. And, a very example, Zomato followed one model. Dunzo, for example, which is Grain Interaction, is saying that, hey, I'm not going to do too much investment. There is a possibility of, scaling more slowly. That's okay, but not too much of investment from the investors. So you have all examples of how to succeed using different models. But the one thing that is important is for the entrepreneur, the startup, to stay focused while they are at it. Listening to mentors, listening to other people who come in and talk about this is what you should be doing, advising. It's in many instances dangerous. People like me who pretend to be great mentors and come in and advise, you have to always take it with a pinch of salt, because we think about your problem, your company for about half an hour or 1 hour or 1 day or 2 days when you have an issue and we come and try to solve your problem. Whereas you're 24/7 struggling with your problem, your challenges, your aspirations, that you would know more about the space that you're operating in than any of us. The expertise that mentors bring in is the diversity of their experience and the examples. If you say, this is the type of challenge that I have, a mentor would say, oh, is that the type of challenge? I know a company which may not be in your sector, but had a similar challenge. It may be people related, it may be investment related, it may be a technology related, it may be IP related, it may be some legal issue, but I know how they tackle. So I can give you some examples of how they tackled it, which may apply in your scenario, which you have to decide. Or I can connect you with people who have faced similar problems and encourage them and follow up and make sure that the problem is solved for them. So that's the other, I wouldn't call it piece of advice, another thing that I would like to share with the young entrepreneurs, to say that you know the business, you know the vertical, you know the business model, you think about it 24/7. So don't get carried away by other people coming with a lot of experience or with a lot of cash, saying that this is the way the business should be run. The more conviction that you demonstrate and display, the more attracted the investors will be to your business. So these are some examples. There are several things that I've learned. I've been part of the Chennai Angels group. In fact, there are a few people that got inducted in the Chennai Angels group today. It's a great group, very successful people who are part of that group. So it's just so phenomenal to interact with each other and learn from them. So it's a great experience. And one of the things that we always say is, our motto is, while we provide some seed investing, some capital for the companies to grow, our interest is for these companies to succeed. It's not so much the return that we will get. It's much more about the success that we want to see in all these startups. So most of these angel investors or groups, if not all the participants, many of the participants, you'll find them to be quite altruistic, very helpful. So leverage on those type of associations, industry organizations for your growth. And as I said in the beginning, just keep talking about your company in social media, whether it's treated as spam or not. Keep sending mails as to what's happening in in your industry, in your company. And people someday, it will hit the right person at the right time. And bingo, that will be a big opportunity for you to grow from, that you can talk about for a long time to come. So these are somewhat of disparate things that I just wanted to mention. No specific order. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions in the minds of people. So if we can, if I'll pause here and perhaps start the interactions, then we can explore some more topics jointly. Oh, Gopal?
Yeah, thank you, Lakshmi. Now, we heard a phenomenal talk with a lot of deep insight into various issues being seen from different perspectives. But the entire discussion today, the entire learning for all of us today will be phenomenally better if the questions answer session, the kind of questions you will ask. And so if you can put this in the chat, I'll sum the questions up, look at similar questions and then give it to Lakshmi. And so while you guys are putting it up, if I can personally ask you some questions, Lakshmi.
Please.
You talked of a couple of companies which had challenges due to the pandemic. I mean, that was a completely black swan event, which I don't think anybody could have anticipated. So can startups plan for black swan events?
They can plan for black swan events that have occurred in the past. This black swan events of the future, it is very unpredictable, but to some extent it can plan. Again, I go back to the industry examples that we have. Again, talking from the IT industry, some of the huge learnings. 2001, the World Trade Center and the terrorist attack. It's the biggest customer base, the largest economy, the biggest market for the Indian IT companies. It's so uncertain. Nobody anticipated that kind of impact that kind of a terrorist attack would have. So immediately the conversations around all over the world was geopolitical terrorist threats. And so people said, why would we want to work outside the country? They usually talk about the four horsemen. The moment there is any this thing, there is protectionism protectionism, nationalism, populism, isolationism. So those isms started coming. People said, oh my God, the industry is depending so much on workforce from India. That's in the neighborhood of Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc. So what is it that is going to happen? So what did the industry do? Industry said, okay, diversify the location. The entire industry said, this is geopolitical risk is something that we may not have considered in the past, but hereafter, that's a significant factor that we have to consider. So subsequent to that, any event anywhere in the world, the question of whether there is continuity, there is disaster recovery, there is contingency plan, never came into the equation. One learning, one experience, and not just the IT industry, rest of the industries also learned from it. Likewise, the financial crisis of 2008, practically all the companies were impacted because the dependence on the financial sector was so high. People said we have to diversify. Concentration risk is very high. That's a great thing that happened during that. So events like that, one after the other, has taught the industry how to change the model, how to be prepared for the risks that have happened in the past. But events like this pandemic, not prepared for. But the resilience came in because of the technology again, communication, contact, the infrastructure, the bandwidth availability is so good that there were so many things that happened, that changed, because of which the companies all over the world were prepared. It took some time for them to prepare, that were prepared. And there were companies, a whole lot of companies that benefited. Again, talking about a startup, there's a company called Flitta. Flitta is a startup providing logistic services to corporates. When somebody gets transferred from one location to another, they just call up Flitta. They signed up with Accenture. Accenture says, these are the people who are getting transferred. Just go talk to them and make sure that the transition is smooth. Flitta takes care of everything. Packing, moving from place A to place B. When the person arrives at place B, everything's set up. That's a company. And the pandemic hit. Boom. That's it. No transfers, nothing. People are staying put. What to do? They immediately pivoted the model. They went back to the same companies. What is the challenge now? Oh, we have to shift these servers. We have to shift this computer equipment from office to the residential location. We are doing a remote onboarding. So there are certain equipment that we have to supply to the new employees who are joining the company. It could be from simple laptops to other types of equipment that we'll have to send. Flitta said, okay, fine, we do that. Earlier, we used to use trucks and containers to transport. Now we'll use smaller vehicles, maybe even two-wheelers, auto rickshaws and things in order to do it if it is local. And if it has to be done across cities, we will do it. So they have learned. As a result, that's another model, another solution that is available. So from the past models, people have experienced, they have learned, they are ready. But the newer things, it's very difficult in some areas. Like, for example, this is an example that I like to talk about quite a bit. The nuclear power industry. Just two accidents. Two major accidents. The number of deaths that have resulted from a nuclear accident is so few. It's a fraction of what has happened in airplane accidents or any other form of accidents. And yet it's considered risky because of the side effects, etc., etc. Major accident of Chernobyl. That is the most devastating one there. Manual error, people know, and people have made sure. Two problems. One, the safety shell wasn't there. Russians thought that wouldn't happen. But now there is no nuclear power plant that's built without the safety shell that is outside, that is thick and hard and, really a resistant thing. And the second thing, Fukushima was, everything was going right, managed it, but suddenly the water surge in that and the steam pressure, due to some electrolytic process that was catalyzed by the zirconium capsules in which the nuclear fuel was cased, hydrogen got generated and a huge explosion that took out the reactors there. Now people know, hey, this is what something has happened. Within the following 1 year, the cladding in many of the atomic power plants have changed from zirconium to an alloy, which will not react with steam to produce hydrogen. So it has become safer. So people are learning, and now the newer form of fuel that is coming, that is proliferation resistant, etc., etc. So the biggest advantage that we have is having learned from the past black swan events. To predict the future events, somewhat difficult, but in the same area, they can predict. Virus, everybody will be prepared. Nuclear plants, they'll be prepared, etc.
So, as an angel investor, what are all the factors would you look at before deciding? So you gave one example of the Bangalore company, small company, but you saw the passion, you saw their. So like that, are there say 6 bullets or 7 bullets saying these are the things angel investors should look for in a startup before deciding whether to put their money or not?
Yeah, it depends on the investor's style. There are different people. There are some people who say, fintech is my area. That's the focus area for me. I'm going to concentrate on that. Or there are some people who say, I'm any technology company, SaaS companies, etc. So it depends on the individual style. And it is important to know the individual investor's style for the entrepreneur, because they want to take the money from the person who's passionate about the sector that he's involved in. If somebody is giving a large amount of money who doesn't care about what the problem that you're trying to solve, usually that person is coming in not as a strategic investor for you, who's going to help you, is a financial type of investor. So is focused a lot more on return. So it's important for them to look at whether the investor has interest in that area. So from an investor's perspective, that is the first thing that I look at. Am I an interesting investor for the entrepreneur? Does he want my money, or can he take it from anyone else who is better qualified to help him? So I have to make that call. So I made it known that deep science and technology is an area that I'm interested in. That's an area I want to support entrepreneurs. I'm not necessarily looking at significant returns in that particular area. I understand that there'll be a lot of failures, but I do like it for the learning it provides. So the understanding the investor that they're taking the money from, or the investor that they approach, is very important for them, number one. Number two, what is it that I look for? I say that, has he thought about this? Has he thought about it? Or is he jumping into doing something because his friends are doing it, someone else is doing it? Does he have some expertise in that area? Is he committed to it? I don't even, to look for passion at that stage may not be all that, it may not be there. It is difficult, but at least is he committed to this? What is the level of interest? So that's the second thing. There are some people who come in and say that, hey, I want to start a edutech startup, a test preparation startup. Why? Because there is a gap in this. Do you know about other companies that are doing in this space? If the person says, no, I don't know, or if you know some names and you ask him, have you come across these names? If he says, I've really not come across that, means, he has not studied that area enough. And so that gives some idea of what he is committed to, what his interests are. That's the second thing. And then the third one, you can go on, is the energy. Is he depending on this being successful very quickly in order to solve some financial problem, or does he have the bandwidth to go on, even if it takes much longer time? Does he have that kind of a support system? Does he have the energy? What kind of connections does he have? What kind of personality skills that he has? And finally, and the most important thing is the values. Will he carry out business in a very honest and ethical and transparent manner? These are the key things that we look for. I always say that, we are not there to evaluate the idea. Any idea can be made successful if the entrepreneur puts his energy and the money behind it. So it's not the idea, all ideas are successful. It's the entrepreneur who makes it a great idea. We don't look at the educational qualification of the entrepreneur. That's also secondary. It just doesn't really matter. So things that people consider many of the things that people consider are important for investors may not really be all that important.
Thanks. So you actually gave me a nice segue into what I was thinking of from the next question. See, your interest in deep tech, and a lot of us are interested in deep tech now, science and so on. But if we see this is restricted to incubation centers of a few leading colleges, let's say a few IITs, the Institute of Science, VIT, PSG Tech. So there are a few of them are sort of equipped to do this. Now, if we wanted this to explode, what do you think needs to happen? I mean, Tamil Nadu itself has 500 engineering colleges. So if deep tech has to explode, what needs to be done so that this really can take off?
Yeah. When I talk about deep science and deep tech, the institution should have depth in one or two disciplines of that science or technology. That is very important. If there is an engineering college that's setting up just engineering courses, they are offering basic BE and tech degrees. They may have a few PhDs who are required in order to be teachers in that particular college because that is mandated. And the teachers themselves are not pursuing research, not publishing papers. It's not to say that they cannot have an incubation center. They can have an incubation center, but that will not be a deep science or a tech thing. They can solve other type of problems that does not require deep science and technology. So the key ingredient or the thing that I look for is there a sufficient amount of research that's going on? It's in the corporate world, the more you invest in research and development, the more money that goes, there's more innovation, there's more technology that is going to come out. And that is true in educational institutions also. The more you invest in professors, in research activities, in publishing papers, then there'll be a great deal of opportunities available for the students who learn from those schools, from their research, from those type of teachers to come up with newer ideas because their fundamentals will be strong. They will understand how things would evolve and things like that. And the one point that I just want to make here is there's a big initiative that the principal scientific advisor, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, started. You might have heard about it, called that Smart Innovation at Bharat. They're trying to build a platform. The PSA's office is trying to build a platform. The contract is that platform is being built by NSC IT. They have the capability and they have certain inherent assets that will make it good, faster development. It's essentially a platform for industry, academic institutions, research institutions to collaborate on small problems, medium-sized problems, large problems. Industry can throw problems at the research institutions, or research institutions can throw innovation back to industry, and startups can emerge from that. All the startups are encouraged to use that kind of a platform in order to either post problems or benefit from the research that happens. So it's short answer is yes, all the colleges can have incubators, but the type of incubation that happens will have to be a little more specific. The deep science and tech incubation centers are at this stage only in deep science and tech institutions.
Okay. So, I mean, while I recognize that today we have an audience across India, but I would like to ask a question on a very parochial basis that Chennai itself is not recognized for a vibrant startup community. And so what needs to be done for Chennai or Tamil Nadu to get a tag that it does have a vibrant? So one possibility I thought was that maybe we need great ambassadors. I mean, you yourself, for instance, a great ambassador for Tamil Nadu. Sridhar Vembu, you mentioned, is a great. And the latest poster boy, Girish Mathrubootham, with his fresh works. I mean, he was always doing very well, but with the latest IPO, I think there's a lot of visibility. So do we need poster boys to make a place vibrant? do we need other factors? And if yes, what are the other factors?
Yeah, I mean, all of that would be necessary. For example, taking the example of Zoho and Freshworks, etc. It's there are a number of companies in the SaaS space. To lay a claim, to stake a claim that, hey, we are the SaaS capital of India. Everything that happens in and around SaaS and the most successful SaaS companies are from Chennai or from Tamil Nadu. That's a bold step. That's a bold move. That's a bold claim that we'll have to start making. Who are the people who can make, and the people who have been successful there because there is credibility. People like Girish Mathabudam or Suresh Sambandam who's driving that, or Maran from Car Technologies who's trying to do that. There are ChargeBees, Bala. These are people who can come out, not necessarily talk only about about their respective companies, which is also important, but also the capability that it exists and the number of companies that are here. So that's how you build some noise around what is happening in this sector. Today, I think, at least within the NASSCOM circles, it is understood and appreciated that Tamil Nadu, and more specifically Chennai, can claim the title of the SaaS capital, software as a service capital, as far as the companies are concerned. So why successful companies, brand ambassadors are there. People like Sridhar Vembu go about lecturing in universities and colleges and things like that. We have to do similar things in other areas that we want to excel in. Other areas where we want to stake a claim. There aren't too many other areas because if I talked about the Telangana story of how they want to create the Genome Valley. The moment you say, I'm creating the Genome Valley, I've got so much land in this particular area, I've got so many companies that are in the pharmaceutical sector, this is the level of investment. And the ministers and the politicians and the bureaucrats start talking about it. There is a gravitational thing that's going towards that. The gravity attracts many of the companies. Like Bangalore, there's the institutional infrastructure. If you want to look at, say, the pharmaceutical area or the biologics area, biosimilars area, you've got Biocon, a poster child there. There's a National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS, which is doing a whole lot of research. There are a lot of companies that are getting incubated there, etc., etc. So it's that institutional infrastructure, the intellectual infrastructure of people, the companies, all that will have to come. And all those people should be willing to spend some time in promoting the industry by convincing themselves that as the sector grows, so will they. It is necessary for others also to grow in order for them to grow successfully.
But let me give you an example of Ather, a company which was incubated in Chennai, grew in Chennai, and finally, when it came to the scaling up stage, moved to Bangalore. Because they felt that Bangalore had all the necessary ingredients, which Chennai did not have. So what is that secret sauce? Is it only the availability of money that they can go to VCs? I don't think so. But if you talk to people, they say no. I mean, jokingly, people talk of the pub culture, but I really don't think people move because of the pub culture. Is it easier to get people? What is it that?
Yeah, it is. It's clearly the reason why Ather went there, to the extent that I understand, is one, people, availability of people.
That is
quickly,
what he said.
Number one. That is number one. Number two, which he wouldn't say, is the government, the political setup, and the encouragement and the lack of interference from those authorities that help them. Or the interference here that push them to go into another geography, which is something that is very sad.
Put up his plant in Hosur, which is Tamil Nadu. So I don't think that was the worry.
No, it was initially, there is a difference between setting up in Hosur and setting up in Chennai. If you want to do it in Chennai, it's far more cumbersome, far more bureaucratic than setting it up in a place like that, where it's that's okay type of this thing. Similar situation with Ola. The number of opportunities that Tamil Nadu has lost, two primary reasons. People, availability of people, and two, lack of proactive decision making on the part of people, decision makers, to encourage, to welcome, and to take quick decisions in favor of this type of entrepreneurship.
If we were to look at companies as startups, they succeed. What would be the major challenges for scaling up which startups should look out for?
I mean, scaling up is in most cases, scaling up the problem is it's people and leadership. People and leadership. I'll give you one example. This is an example that the big company. I'm sure it's applicable to startups also. The example from L&T, S.N. Subramaniam, in one of the discussions in a CII event, was talking about what is the problem of growth. He said leadership, and the way he's put it very, very, very simply. He said, there is a 100 crore project that I run successfully. If I try to get those people, the leaders there to learn and expect them to run a 500 crore project, they're not there. They fail. Okay. He says, I don't know why, but they fail. Similarly, a 500 crore project person done extremely well, scale it up to 1,000 or 2,000 crore project, problem. Doesn't happen. So issue of leadership. Second one, capability. Capability is one of the biggest problems. He showed some videos of how they are building the bullet train, the tracks between Bombay and Ahmedabad, using machinery, prefabricated those slabs and building machinery to build machinery. He says, I cannot get enough people to operate those type of machines. Not enough engineers are available. The third example that he gave, using drones is across a valley. If he has to get a transmission line, he's saying, I want to use drones to lift the cables and go and hoist it on those type of towers. And he showed the video of actual drone doing it. If I can do it one by one segment by another segment, it will take me years. I have the ability to buy more and more drones, but I don't have enough people who can program. I don't have enough people who can pilot. I don't have enough people who are trained, etc. So scaling is purely a capacity problem. And we are unfortunately, we're still struggling to see how skills can be built, how deep skills can be built. It's not the data scientist cannot be created by attending a 1-week program or a 2-week program. The type of problems that are expected to be solved, it's like the program that Digital Skills Academy is launching. It has to be a 120-hour program, or if you want to be a cybersecurity medium, not even an expert, you have to undergo that training over a 960 hours of work and do that. That is, people are not willing to make that kind of investment. It is the industry that has to make the investment. It is the academia that has to adopt newer ways of teaching and training and developing the people. So it's people and leadership, both of which are people-related issues.
So, situation, if you got, let's say, a 1-hour meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister Modi on a subject of how to invigorate the startup ecosystem in India, what would you suggest and what would you ask for?
Generally, broadly speaking, I would just say, trust the entrepreneurs, trust the industry. Trust them. They're all, the factor of trust is very, very important. If they do something wrong, penalize them, mete out the worst type of penalty that you want to, but just don't start on that basis and too much of regulation, too much of interference, etc. That's something that we'd like to avoid. It's, it's so sad to see people go for approvals, some of these startups, and, examples, same drones or communication that they want to set something up. Like there is a company called Astrom, again in Bangalore. They wanted to test some 5G equipment. They said that the reach, they have a product called the GigaMesh that can reach something like a 2-kilometer radius from a single tower and 5G quality, high bandwidth. So you can cover a number of villages without this thing. But for them to get that test done and to get that spectrum, it took years. People say, no, this spectrum cannot be given. That's a rare commodity. What are you going to do with it? What is the security and things like that? I mean, something that you have to trust and give them because they're good people. These are all PhDs working and so trying to solve that problem. So it's I would say that somebody, a secretary, joint secretary, or someone, most of them mean well, but because of the fear of taking a decision and the consequence of something going wrong, they postpone, they delay, they procrastinate. That impacts growth, that impacts innovation. So if you have to be a little more aggressive in terms of taking decisions, a little more trusting of what these people are trying to do. And we've been asking them for a moratorium for 3 years. Just 3 years, leave them alone. Don't ask them tax statements. Don't ask them anything. For a big part, that is something that has come about. Many of these people have been left alone. But still, there are certain areas. I want to start up, for example, the electric vehicle battery. This thing, we know we have to behave responsibly. The company knows, but you have to get a pollution control board certificate, and that person is visiting. That person delays. Put some timeline. If it is a must, put some timeline, and within that period, you'll have to give that, and avoid all the leakages and things like that. So it's it's a number of things. But the basic thing is trust them, allow them to innovate, allow them to do things. There'll be a few mistakes, there'll be a few cheats, but I mean the overall scheme of things, that will not hurt so badly.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Kanishkar, who's from the Rajalakshmi College of Engineering. His main question is, what is the scope for startups in the defense sector?
Defense sector, plenty. Defense sector, plenty of opportunities. One example, Dynamatic company again based out of Bangalore, aerospace components making. Now they have won a contract to supply aircraft structures to Lockheed Martin for the F-15 program. F-15 fighter jets. Dynamatic Technologies going to supply aerostructures for them. So that's one of the examples, and there are very many that see the defense. If you look at the strategic aspects, we talk about, hey, we don't have semiconductor manufacturing plant, we don't have wafer producing companies, we are dependent on silicon wafers from outside. But for the strategic needs of the country, whatever is considered strategic needs, which is the defense purpose, everything is self-contained within the defense organization. For example, in Chandigarh, although one part of the semiconductor complex got burnt out, but there is a plant that is producing semiconductors specifically for defense purposes, starting from the silicon wafer. It requires a lot of investment in order to scale it up, but it is meeting the defense requirements. So many of the defense requirements are fulfilled by the government organizations, perhaps one of the reasons why it is slow. But now that sector is opening up for partnerships. One other example is the LCA, Light Combat Aircraft. The Indian Air Force has given some order for 60 or 75 such jets. And 60% of the manufacturing of those LCA jets, the components, etc., are going to come from subcontracting, many of them from MSMEs. So there is opportunities for growth in that particular area, but the investment in defense manufacturing itself will have to step up. Likewise, ISRO has said that they will source from startups and from other subcontractors. So the opportunity is gradually building. There, the trouble is, if you go with a solution and say, here is a drone that I have come up with, can you use it and test it? It will take about 6 or 8 years. But if the defense organization decides on a particular drone, either imported or their own design, if they say we have decided and we want to scale it up, then there is plenty of opportunity for companies to manufacture them.
There's a question from Easter Prince. He runs an IoT, industrial IoT company. His question is that for such a company, is offering services better or getting to be a product company selling IoTs? What would you recommend?
See, I'll give you a couple of examples, which you can. There is a company, again, Chennai-based company, a company called Atsuya. Atsuya is, they're providing IoT-based solutions for efficiency in cold storage. You go to a shop like a retail outlet like Licious, which is selling meat, or a vegetable store. They have all these cheese, milk, cold storage units. The temperature is, no matter what the ambient outside temperature is, the inside temperature will be independent. If the outside is cooler, the inside temperature will be cooler than what is necessary. It consumes more power, it will consume more water, and various, you'll have to maintain the humidity, you have to maintain the, the carbon dioxide inside, etc., etc. So most often it is found that it is over-engineered, overcooled. Atsuya has come up with a solution that is used in many of these cold storage devices, transportation, where it will optimize the usage of power so that the right temperature, humidity, particulate matter, the low ppm, etc., is maintained by using these IoT devices. A good example, what is the significant benefit? If you go to Licious and say each one of these storage will cost you so much for you to install, you buy it from us. Most of them will say, no, it's not worth it, buying it and then maintaining it, etc. Whereas they offer it as a service, don't worry about it. There is going to be so much of saving as far as the power consumption, as far as the crispness or the product quality, wastage is concerned. And here is a portion that I want you to share with me. I'll provide it as a service. People are willing to buy it. They've got contracts like that. So there it is working as a service. There's another company called Heterogeneous, which is also providing IoT devices for the telecom towers. They're kind of exporting telecom towers. They have the generator, the devices, the antenna that has to be maintained. There's usually some person who's maintaining it. Somebody has to climb up the pole and do all that kind of it's an intensive effort. The mean time to repair is very high. So they have come up with a box that will monitor the entire thing, the antenna, the power consumption, the battery, if they're using battery as a backup, the signal strength, a whole lot of other things. And in future, they intend connecting it to drones which will go and inspect these towers and provide the data, which is integrated in this IoT device. And they provide maintenance schedule, provide people-less tower management, etc. There it is, they supply the equipment. They buy it, they have boxes and boxes they create, and they've built a good solution where they can just keep it in the tower, plug it in, it starts working, and somebody can monitor it remotely from that. So there it is, it is a capital-intensive model, and that's the way it works, because those companies do not want any other type of model. So it depends on industry to industry, but most people prefer a service-oriented type of an approach.
Okay.
Okay, at this stage, I will have to.
We are running out of time. Actually, we have run out of time. So thank you so much. It was a fantastic. So on behalf of everybody who was there, let me express our deep appreciation, thanks, and gratitude for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much
for participating and staying right till the end. We look forward for you to join us in future events like this last Saturday of every month. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Gopal. Thank you, everyone.